close to 15 Earth minutes. All right, we will reconvene at 7:30. This is our opportunity to have public comment. The board takes this opportunity to allow any citizen to address the board on any matter they would like to, other than public hearing. So, is there anyone who would like to speak to the board regarding any matter? Is there anyone who would like to speak to the board regarding any matter? Is there anyone who would like to speak regarding any matter? Hearing none, we'll declare public comment to be not quite closed. Colonel Meyer, as the new commander at Fort A.P. Hill, the largest military installation on the East Coast, where soldiers sharpen their fighting edge, I think that's the motto. If you would like to say something briefly to the board, this is rebroadcast throughout the county, so they may want to see you again. If you would just like to come in and say, hello, my name is Dave, or hello, my name is Colonel Meyer.
Ladies and gentlemen of the board, good evening. My name is Lieutenant Colonel Dave Meyer. I'm the new commander at Fort A.P. Hill. I appreciate the opportunity to come and say good evening. What I'd like you to leave with tonight is just one idea, is that your post, our post, is strong and getting stronger. I know over the past few days we've given you some audible reminders that were there. I know everybody calls that the sound of freedom. I'd like you to have this idea. That's the sound of success. Because that sound you hear is made by a Marine battalion from New York State who passed no fewer than 7 other installations on their way to come here because they chose to come here because this is where they want to train. Next month, we're going to have another Marine Reserve battalion from North Carolina. They're going to pass another half-dozen different installations on their way here. So from New York to North Carolina, you've got people of all 4 services and all 3 components who are choosing to come here, who are choosing to train here, and choosing to spend their money here. So I'd like to leave you with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Colonel. And if there's anything we can do to help you, please let us know. But I'm sure that's going to be more or less reversed because you're the federal government. So we do appreciate it. Welcome to Caroline, and we'll look forward to more conversation. Okay, public hearings. Our public hearing is for the proposed naming of Caroline County Circuit Courthouse after the late Judge J. Peyton Farmer and the General District Courtroom after the late Judge Frank L. Benzer. This is now the process the county has engaged in after accepting the new guidelines for building naming and room naming conventions. So at this point in time, we will declare the public hearing to be open. Is there anyone who would like to speak regarding this matter? Sheriff Lippa.
Mr. Thomas, thank you so much, and members of the board. I'm here to speak on behalf of J. Peyton Farmer. I've been humbled and honored to have known him as a judge when I first came here as a state trooper back in 1979. So for 35 years, knowing Peyton Farmer, who was, again, born, raised in Caroline. His education was here. He was an attorney here. He then became our Commonwealth's attorney in Caroline County. Went to be the juvenile judge, general district judge, and circuit court judge. As far as I'm concerned, I think that's an excellent idea to do this in honor of J. Peyton Farmer. And he's so good for those that like to play tennis. I can remember even on a personal note, playing tennis with J. Peyton Farmer, and I felt like, okay, good young trooper. I am 25 years of age, and he was in his 40s, let's say. I figured I could take him, but boy, he really gave me a lesson in tennis, and is an excellent tennis player. Just wanted to put that out there, too. What an excellent man, and I think y'all are doing the right thing by doing that. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff. Is there anyone else who would like to speak regarding this matter? Is there anyone else who would like to speak regarding this matter? Is there anyone else? Hearing none, public hearings are declared closed. Any board comments? Mr. Seeley?
I think we've talked about this. I think this is the natural progression and the right thing to do, and I just, at this point, if there are no other comments, like to make a motion to name the Caroline County Circuit Courthouse after the late Judge J. Peyton Farmer and the General District Courtroom after the late Frank L. Benzer.
Second. Okay, motion made by Mr. Seeley, seconded by Mr. Akers. Discussion. My discussion point with Judge Farmer was I still wasn't going that fast, and He was a Yankee fan, so he had to be a great guy, like Mr. Black. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. So that motion carries unanimously, and I'm not sure of the time frame. Do you have any idea about time frame for the actual letters and things? Was that 60 days? You can just say yes or no from there. For 60 days? 90 days is enough time?
Depends on which way you go. I mean, there was just a lettering, or there was a plaque that you could do. If you do the bronze plaque, it's going to take longer.
I thought we were going to do lettering on the building
And lettering above the courtroom.
and lettering above the courtroom. Okay, if you'll get some time estimates, maybe we could try to plan that.
Well,
It's basically August now, so September, early October. We were trying to say before it got too hot, or before it was too hot, and now we got to do it before it's cold. So late September, early October, if you can get back to us, Mr. Sheba, we appreciate it. All right, thank you, gentlemen. Let's see, Mrs. Curran. Agenda item number 5 was us to talk about the delinquent personal property taxpayers in the publishing in the newspaper, and we have received CDs today and emails
Last night.
with the list. So if there's anything you would like to say to start off, and then I think Mr. Black was the lead for this issue.
Right, I am still, have not finished the bank reconciliation yet, so I don't want to say it's the final list. I think it's pretty close to being who was delinquent as of June 30th. And I'm trying to take off the names as people are paying, so that they wouldn't get published in the paper if they had paid their taxes since June 30th. We have had some good response to the delinquent notices. They did hit the post office over the weekend. We were inundated with calls for that, and unfortunately, Utilities was doing cutoffs today as well, so we had a lot of people trying to call and get those paid. So timing was kind of crazy yesterday, but we are having good response. We've got payments coming in already on those notices. We have placed, looked like about 500 DMV stops so far this year, and have set up close to 200 payment arrangements. So those people would be left off if they make a payment arrangement and they're keeping their payments, they would not be included. They are included on the list that you all got, because I wanted to give you a whole list of who was out there. But all I have to, we're collecting. If you all want to authorize the publication in the paper, that is up to the board to authorize that.
Okay, and we were, I don't know who's had a chance to look at the list. We got it last night via email, but I've got it up here, and it seems like the highest one on there was almost $50,000. And then we talked about the top 20 or 25, and that's in the $6,000 range.
Right, and we've taken another look at some of those that are in that top range. The top company, to my knowledge, is out. They are, it was a corporation, and they have transferred their assets to other entities or sold them. So we are trying to take another look at those ourselves. We have found several of the ones that are in that top 50 that we might have had a DMV stop on, but that is not enforceable any longer. So now we found a job, and we're sending, or a bank account, and we're sending liens to grab that money in its entirety. So we're taking another look at these that are in that top 25, 50.
Okay. Mr. Black, you had questions before?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, thank you for getting us that list. That's very helpful to kind of see, as far as what people are. I guess rather than, and with a lot of the questions have been answered simply by that list, but I guess from the Board of Supervisors perspective, I wouldn't mind seeing some sort of policy that we create as far as, in working with Ms. Curran, as far as who gets the names printed in the paper, because as she had talked about, if someone's making an effort to pay, I mean, $2 million is a lot of money that was outstanding, especially when we start talking about, fixing salary scales for, for teachers or whatever we were talking about before. I mean, whatever we need the money for, you know, that $2 million is, and after doing an 11-cent tax increase, it's really hard to tell people that taxes are going to go up before we are actually collecting the money. So I guess from my perspective, I would like to see maybe staff work on with Ms. Curran some sort of policy that's in, if that's okay with the board, in which what would be the process for the name to be printed in the paper. I have no problem with that. You know, I personally have no problem with it because it's not fair to everyone else who are paying their taxes. So, I mean, I guess from other board members, I'd like to hear if that's okay with staff to work on that, so we can have some sort of set policy.
I think that's a good next step is have staff work with Mrs. Curran and then probably come back with us, because we all got the list last night, but that doesn't say we had a chance to go through it and make sure we understand. I just did a summary, and you're right, it's $1.96 million on these 5,780.
And as she said, I think that list is going to go significantly lower by, she said yesterday in our email that she sent to us, she was inundated with people don't want their name on that list. They don't want their name publicized. And if people are working to pay their bills and have fallen on hard times, I understand that. So their name shouldn't be printed if they're working with Ms. Curran. You know? Right. I mean, if you know, I mean, so that's, I mean, there's going to be some details that we need to work out. For example, if there's someone who's got a disputed, someone has a disputed, you know, if they have a dispute with you as to what the bill is, you know, I mean, I don't know what we do. That would be an example. So there would be some details, I think, that would have to be worked out.
Okay. You want to give Mrs. Curran and Mr. Culley another few weeks to give her a chance to kind of scrub the list again?
I'm going to be away for the next couple of weeks, so if we could wait. And I'd also, I know you all want to publish it, but if we can wait to see, like, how much comes in, how much we can work off by August 31st, which is the deadline for those.
Okay.
You know, maybe have a policy in place if we need to move forward. But I think you'd want to.
So we were going to meet August 26th was our next meeting. You want us to wait for the first meeting in September?
We can meet August 26th. I'll be back. I mean, I can come back at that time.
But you said August 31st was the deadline.
It's the deadline for the payments. I mean, we'll have an idea, but if we could have a policy in place.
Right.
If you,
I think the first thing we need to do is work on the policy. I mean, as far as, rather than, I mean, she can scrub, the list can be scrubbed as people.
So you want Mr. Culley to develop the policy?
I would think that working with yeah, as long as it's with Ms. Curran has.
Okay, that's fine. You have a policy
I have a suggestion. I think the policy needs to be something like there's a date, and 30 days after. If August 31st is the date that for this cycle, you know, the second week in September, the names of delinquent taxpayers will be published, so that everybody knows. I mean, this isn't to go out and just whip up on everybody, but this is, you know, we have folks that aren't paying. I looked at some of them. I mean, we've got some from 2008 to 2014 haven't paid personal property or real estate.
this is just personal property.
Personal property, rather. They need to be aware that, you know, that second week in September, we're going to publish the names of all the folks that haven't paid their personal property tax.
Well, and we're only working with those folks that, I mean, the taxes that are due for 2013 and back. I'm not including any of the 2014s because they have only had, at this point, like 6 weeks to pay. Even August 31st is only 3 months, even though we're sending them a notice. But the other treasurers that I talked to said that they all waited. They didn't include this first half of 2000 of a year when they were publishing. They only did the previous years and back.
And that's what I'd like to see in the policy is, you know, a date when we're going to publish it, the time frame that it covers, so that we're all clear, so we're not looking for something that happened in, you know, the end of the first cycle in 14. We're looking from 8 to 13 or 9 to 15, whatever, you know, the time frame is. But folks understand that if they haven't paid, I mean, they're going to get published.
Right. Okay.
Does that help, Mr. Colley?
Mr. Akers has a suggestion, too?
What I would like also to see us do is to, in work with Mrs. Curran, let's give people an advance notice. You know, I saw some businesses on there that are in operation today, and I know they're in operation today, and it would not be beneficial to their business if their name showed up in the paper saying, hey, and so I think that we need to send them a letter and say, if you do not pay by this date, then your name will be printed in the paper along with others that have not paid the personal property taxes.
Mr. Akers, yeah, and you, those were all from, those didn't even include this year. You just said that. Those didn't even include this year. That was the last, I mean, some of those businesses, I mean, that bill went out, so for those people that were on that list that you sent us, that bill went out in December,
They had a
correct?
December
Or
bill.
at least, or before.
Yeah, or before, and some of them were 2011, 2012.
Right.
But the fact is, we have not acted in the past. This is something that we're
But she
doing
did put
here.
in, you did have in your most recent, which is
Well,
the
and
copy in our report
Mr.
packet.
Akers, I did include that wording that
Okay.
said if they did not
Okay.
pay by, August 31st,
Then
that the county may publish their,
Good.
their name in the paper.
Good.
I made sure that we had that covered, because we have not included that in the other delinquent notices.
Right.
So-
The other thing, there were a lot of footnotes, if you will, beside of the various names or whatever. Some had a Q, some had a L or D or an F. I'm sure that means something, or it wouldn't be there.
That was a status column, where it's P, W, V.
Right, I'll give you all I can
legend.
email you all the codes. P's are for pay agrees, I think Q is like incarcerated.
Oh, okay.
I can't.
Okay, yeah, okay.
That would be a reason to not pay.
W was waiting on information because we've tried everything we know and we don't know where they are, so, publishing them, maybe somebody will come forward, but yeah.
All right,
And I think it may be good if we know any of the people on that list. We call them and say, listen, if you don't want your name on the, put in the paper, don't call me after the paper goes out and complain about your name being in the paper. You now have an opportunity to resolve the issue before your name gets in the paper. And I did see a couple of companies on there that I know, and I'm calling them up and said, if you don't see your name.
And some of them may have payment arrangements, and we just don't have all the codes on. I've got staff going through now and making sure. I know several of them on there do have pay agrees, and they just don't have the P beside them, so we're working on getting all those
You know the
coded
one I'm
correctly.
talking about? These other
Maybe.
13,000, two different, over on my side of the county. Over on the western side of the county.
I've got them all over the
I know,
county that
the
owe
one I'm talking
delinquent
about is
taxes.
over there.
okay. Go ahead, Mr. Black, and then we'll
Just out of
finalize.
curiosity, on the payment, so if someone's falling on hard times and they call you up and say, hey, I'm having a difficult financial time, and you come with a pay agreement, is there a set policy that you have with that? Like you have to, if, let's say they were over the county $1,000 in back taxes or 500 or whatever the number is, do you say, all right, well, in order to get on the payment agreement, you need to pay us 25% up front and so much per month, or how does that work?
We do have it set up so that hopefully they will pay off that year's tax, whatever they owe by the time another bill comes out. So, I mean, we've got it, we figure out the payments and try to make it, spread it over
They say they do it in 6 months?
6 months, yeah.
Okay. Just out of curiosity, what would it say, if someone owes you, because some of the things on the list that Mr. Akers said, there was one, there was a business with 13,000, other business with like 8,000.
If they would contact us, we would work out something. I mean, we may give
Even
them
post-
extended, like a
post-
2-year
Okay. That's
plan,
all I
try
need.
to factor in how much they were, going to be billed for the next year.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so we are going to, Mr. Taylor, do you want to add something in there, or,
I think it's been said, I think.
okay. You make a motion, Mr. Black?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we, direct staff to come up with a policy regarding the publication of delinquent taxes, personal property taxes in Caroline.
Okay, is there a second? Second. Okay, motion made by Mr. Black, seconded by Mr. Underwood, directing staff to work with Mrs. Kern, the treasurer, for a policy for publishing delinquent taxpayers' names. Discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Motion carries unanimously. And Mr. Cully, I guess you or Mrs. Kern could give us an update on where we are at our 26th meeting. Okay, you sure that's enough time, Beth? Okay. All right, thank you very much. All right, agenda item number 6. I understand the Colonel's here for number 6, and I want to do Mrs. Berriman next, but the federal government trumps everything, so I'm sorry. I know it's usually ladies first. First reading on zoning ordinance text amendment, text 10 2013, text 11 2013, and text 12 2013 regarding rural resorts. Mr. Fincham.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, this item is back on your agenda this evening. It was deferred to tonight from your May 13th Board of Supervisors meeting. At that time, the Planning Commission had again forwarded these text amendments to the Board of Supervisors for your consideration. And at that meeting, the board, with little discussion, deferred these amendments to tonight's meeting. That is the status of the amendments as they currently stand. Staff has not prepared a detailed staff report and is really awaiting direction from the board as to how the board wishes to proceed with these proposed amendments.
All right, gentlemen, Mr. Taylor.
Yes, if I may, I guess the main concern that I have is the second statement dealing with rural resorts that says the structure and activities may not be located within 1 mile of the boundary of Fort A.P. Hill. I really have a concern about that because A.P. Hill is 75,000 acres, and that's a lot of area that's within 1 mile. And if my memory serves me correctly, the rural resort, or provided the board came up with a text amendment to allow it, the one that was considering was within 1 mile of Fort A.P. Hill. So, you know, it seems kind of pointless to take all the time to draw up a text amendment and exclude the very requests that the text amendment originated from. It doesn't seem to be frugal planning, if you will. So I just have a concern about that, that 1 mile radius. I personally would like to see that not be a part of this.
Okay, let's just go down the line. Mr. Black, did you have any questions, concerns?
Yeah, I just have a couple on the rural resort, the 1 mile buffer. I actually disagree with Mr. Taylor. I do believe that needs to stay in there. And so I guess that's going to be a source of contention, I guess, or a debate among us. No problem with that. The other thing, and we've talked about it many times before, I do think a rural resort in Caroline County, the idea of a rural resort, the concept of it is great in theory. I think there are places for it, and if you take like the Mataparai Springs Golf Course or whatever, in that area, that would be great for a rural resort in that area. But in the text amendment that I see, where it says including to but not limited to, okay, where you see alongside on-site recreational activities including but not limited to me, and I know I'm not asking, it's kind of a catch-22, because but not limited to, so what are we, I mean, but not limited to, so can they have a rifle range, I mean, a zip line, I mean, what are we allowing them to have, but not limited to seems very, very vague to me. Because, well, it says, oh, but not limited to. The next thing you know, they've got an AT track. I mean, I'm just throwing that out there as a concern. The other concern I have, and I talked to you about this on the phone, let's say that a rural resort comes in somewhere in the county, let's say around Mataparai Springs, and it's for compensation purposes. It's for a business buys it, and they say, all right, we're going to have our people that we're trying to, get to do business with to come in to relax or whatever, or charge. What happens if that rural resort goes away? Okay, financial, in anytime you start a business or something like that, because this is a special exception, correct?
Yes, sir.
So what happens if the actual rural resort fails? I mean, so they have several structures. You have 20 structures on, let's say they build, because it looks like here that you can build multiple structures. So in that case, what happens when, it's the what if, but it's a very plausible what if. And I'd like to know what happens then if there's a potential buyer. Does it have to remain a rural resort? I mean, what's the policy?
By ordinance, the special exception permit would become null and void if the permit is not followed through upon or that use terminates for a 12-month period of time. So then you have a facility with structures that can no longer be used for the permit for which it was issued. At that time, it would have to come back to the board through some process to reestablish that use or a similar use or some other type of use of that property if that use was not allowed as a by right use. So yes, you have a situation where you could have structures that are built that for one reason or another that use discontinues, and you have structures out there that are unusable under the current zoning. And the board would be faced with the issue of what to do with that property.
Okay, thank you.
Then, Mr. Fincham, before I go to Mr. Underwood, we have that dilemma basically with a lot of things.
Yes, sir.
I mean, we approved the Culpeper Farmers Co-op. They built the building. Shortly thereafter, they decided they didn't want to operate here, so now we've got an empty building. Right?
Yes, sir.
So, I mean, that kind of thing happens, and I'm sure we're going to rely on the Planning Commission and yourself to figure out what to do in those cases, but, I mean, we can't guarantee anything's going to be successful. I wish we could, but we can't. Mr. Underwood?
Yeah, just a couple. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple. The 1 mile boundary, what was the thought behind that, Mr. Fincham?
The idea of a boundary was actually one of the items that was discussed by the board the first time around when this matter was referred back to the Planning Commission for reconsideration. Mm-hmm. That was one of the points of discussion from individual board members as the board discussed this item before they referred it back to the commission.
I'm just kind of thinking about the 200-acre requirement and then the 1 mile boundary, how much effect that would have on what properties or what, around the county that, based on this text amendment and the reason for this coming before us, I'm just seeing what impact it would have on those property owners. I'm not sure.
There are dozens of 200-acre properties outside the 1 acre. There are dozens of, Mr. Fincham, you can tell us how many 200-acre properties are outside the 1 mile buffer of AP Hill. There are probably dozens.
200 acres outside of the 1 mile buffer?
Yes.
That would not be an unreasonable number, and I can get you the exact number.
But now, we actually have a buffer with AP Hill now, as far as zoning and planning that you've been working with as part of the joint land use study, right?
The joint land use study is ongoing. It did not specifically create a buffer to Fort AP Hill. The term of disagreement is compatible uses. But no, the joint land use study itself did not create a buffer,
but
talks about compatible uses.
But we've had, for most part, a planning recommendation for buffers, because there are places that have come close to AP Hill that the Planning Commission decided weren't compatible uses, right? I thought there was a project or two that got turned down because of that.
Well, any zoning matter, whether it's a rezoning or special exception, ultimately would come to the board. The board has the final determination related to that matter.
Right. Well, okay.
So
Well, I'm going to let Mr. Underwood go ahead, because I didn't mean to cut him off, so.
I was just talking to Mr. Akers. I was just talking to Mr. Akers, and originally the 1 mile buffer was not part of this text amendment, correct, Mr. Fincham?
The original recommendation did not have a 1 mile buffer, that's correct.
Okay, so I'm just trying to find out what the impetus was to put it,
I think the Planning Commission looked at the concepts that the board referred back to it in terms of your discussions amongst yourselves and what you would like to see in the way of changes to the, individually, what board members wanted the commission to look at when they reconsidered the text amendment.
Right.
One of the items discussed was a buffer.
right, and I'm just, I'm kind of concerned that it wasn't in the original discussion, and if the person who came before us to discuss a rural resort, if it just somehow, out of happenstance, it only impacted that person, then it kind of looks ugly to me.
If I could I just cut in just 1 minute? In addition to what he's saying, I mean, we got towns with, a 1 mile, but Port Royal, the whole town is within a mile. Bowling Green, the whole time, we got subdivisions, houses, Portabago Bay. I mean, are we saying that a rural resort is going to bring about more traffic than a town, or is going to bring about more issues than a 45, 50 mile, 50 house subdivision? I mean, it makes no sense. I'm sorry, it just makes no sense.
And that's why I'm just wondering why that was placed here. It just seems like it has a little odor to it to me. I could be wrong, but but it just doesn't fit with what we were discussing. And then now we have this condition. So that's my concern. I want us to always be above board, or give the appearance of transparency, and I think I can see through this one.
Mr. Underwood, if the majority of the board wants to remove that condition as we go forward, we can do that.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Akers?
Yeah, I think it probably doesn't smell very well either, to be quite honest. I think discussion was held, and I think that the recommendation was made to impact one. As you look at the other properties around Port Royal and in the 17 quarter, they're within close to a mile. And so you are really taking out of play property that would be on the Rappahannock River or close to the river, close to an area where you could have recreational uses. You're taking those properties out of possibly having a rural resort. I want to be good neighbors to AP Hill. I really do, and I think this board has supported that over the years, that we have done everything we could to try to be good neighbors with Fort AP Hill. But on the other hand, I think that the county has to try to look at for itself as well, and its revenue stream. Certainly with all due respect to Colonel Meyer and Fort AP Hill, we get a lot of jobs out of AP Hill, and I'm very appreciative of that for the people of Caroline County. But as far as other types of revenue, there's very little revenue that comes out of AP Hill for Caroline County. I just believe that the mile, was put in there arbitrarily, I believe, in order to impact the company that came for the proposal, with the proposal. Because a mile just takes them out. A half a mile probably didn't take them out, but a mile does. So if you want to put a buffer in there, look at a half a mile or a quarter of a mile or something, and that's a lot of distance. But it does not look like you are just putting something into the ordinance arbitrarily that eliminates a proposal that has been made to this board and to the county. And so that is my concerns. I think a rural resort, I would love to see a rural resort in this county. I'd love to see one on the western side of the county, to be honest with you. I'm not sure whether Mr. Black would, but I'd love to see one over there on that side of the county. I think it would mean a great deal to Caroline County. But if the place where they're wanting to go is on 17, north of Port Royal, then, hey, I'm all for that as well. I think that's a good location for it also.
Okay. Mr.
That's it.
Seeley?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Akers. Mr. Seeley?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, this, I think we got here because of the vote the last time that was taken. Let me just sort of go back through the rural resort. I have a piece of property in my district that's on roughly 500 acres. It was Camp Easter Seal for many, many, many years, 40. It has been 2 other organizations since then. Neither have made it. If this next endeavor, I shouldn't say haven't made it, if this next endeavor decides that this isn't a good location for them and they close, you will have a piece of property that is set up for roughly 40 rooms, 25 rooms for sleeping quarters, a full-size kitchen, a riding facility. It is an enormous facility. And the question that Mr. Black asked, what happens to that after the special exception falls through? And I think we need to, in this day and time, look forward into what the potential for those facilities are in the future when you approve a special exception, because once it's built, there are any number of things that can go there, and we've all had those discussions in the past. And I think we need to be mindful of Fort A.P. Hill in what could potentially go there in this day and time. We've heard from, we did a road closure for some very specific situations. The sheriff and some others brought to us, and I think those situations we need to be mindful of when we approve a large facility like that closes down, and what does it end up being, because that's going to be the number one question in the future. What does that turn into if the special exception isn't able to survive? Because it reverts back to what, Mr. Fincham, then? Whatever anybody wants it to be?
No, sir, you're still subject to the underlying zoning.
But if it's, let's say it's a facility with 40 rooms, somebody could buy it and live there.
It's probably permitted as a commercial structure, and it couldn't, for example, be turned into a hotel. It would
Right.
still require somebody to come back to the board.
But it could be a personal dwelling. It could be a multifamily dwelling.
Not in the context of like an apartment complex.
No, but I could move my whole family there, all 40 members. The drain field's there, the water system's there, the whole 9 yards.
If it meets the definition of a single-family dwelling and the occupants there too, that is correct.
So it could, I'm just saying that then we start to split hairs over what could really be there. We have to be mindful of what, particularly on a base border, they've had problems in Stafford with Quantico. I think this is a day and time, and it's a decision that we are looking at, and I understand the rural resort, and I agree with Mr. Akers and Mr. Black. I'd love to see a rural resort on the western side of the county where the infrastructure supports it. There's water and sewer. There's roads. I mean, anchored to someplace like Mattaponi Springs where there is actually a facility. But let me go one step further. We allow a rural resort. Can they have an ATV track? Can they have a motocross track? Could they shoot sporting clays 8 or 9 hours a day? I mean, we don't neck down any of the potential outdoor facilities or outdoor activities that could actually take place. We had complaints 4 or 5 years ago. Somebody owned 5 acres and they rode ATVs all weekend long. The whole family and friends showed up and they rode nonstop. There was very little we could do about that. Is that true, Mr.?
Other than the noise ordinance, that's correct.
I mean, there are a number of things that I think need to be looked at when you start to look at a large commercial facility. But traffic, water and sewer, and driving it into a place that makes sense, that could support it, I think is something that we've set up growth areas, we've set up commercial areas. The building that's no longer in use or owned by that organization is a commercial structure that can be sold again as a commercial structure. These structures, just like the old Camp Easter Seal, is a very difficult property to deal with in terms of zoning, in terms of what goes there. How you handle it becomes this prickly thing that nobody really knows how to handle. And I think we need to be mindful of that early on in the process so we don't end up with another sea urchin that we don't know how to juggle. Those are my comments, Mr. Chairman.
Actually, I like sea urchin.
It's good to eat.
Yeah. Okay. We have a couple of really interesting issues. This text amendment or set of text amendments were presented by, obviously, an applicant who had an idea of creating a text amendment or something we didn't have defined, which means we had a text amendment. The reality of it is that same proposer could build a house with 14 bedrooms and invite whoever he wanted to come to the house. It just wouldn't be called a rural resort. It would be his house, and you can't tell me, as the county, who can come and visit me at my house. So we could have a case where there was totally no control over somebody who built a house, or we could have some sort of control where we called it a rural resort, if that's where we go. The other thing is, we do have some concern of what happens if it fails. But am I to require a bond from every business or every venture that comes into the county and say, if you fail, I need to have $1 million so I can tear down your building? You know, we just don't do that. So those are things we will have to think about in this process. But Mr. Fincham, you can, of course, work through those, and as you said, the majority of the board can take any item out of this potential text amendment it would like, or add things to it if they would like. So the process as you see it now would be come back for a third reading or go to public hearing, right?
Can I ask a question?
Second. Let him do that one first, and then I'll let you. This was it's our first reading of the new version, right?
Yes, sir. We
So-
can continue this first reading, and you can direct staff other areas that you wish us to fine-tune, address, however the board wants to look at that.
Okay. Doesn't sound like a lot of fine-tuning. Sounds like major surgery, but that's another story. Mr. Taylor, you had a question?
Yes,
you wanted to
I
add?
was asking, would it be appropriate, or could I make a motion that Standard 2 be taken out, if there was support enough on the board to do that?
Well, you could make that motion, and that would be directing Mr. Fincham to then come back with a second reading where we look at it then. I imagine if your motion to take that out passed or failed, it would pass or fail at a second reading. So, but that's just my imagination.
Well, I would so move that we eliminate Standard 2 in the process.
Which is specifically...
Rural resort structures and activity may not be located within 1 mile of the boundary of Fort A.P. Hill. If I could get a second.
Second.
Okay, that was Mr. Underwood. Okay, standards for rural resort, you want to eliminate Section 2. Motion was made by Mr. Taylor, seconded by Mr. Underwood. All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay.
Nay.
Mr. Taylor, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Black?
Nay.
Mr. Underwood?
Aye.
Mr. Akers?
Aye.
Mr. Seeley?
Nay.
And I vote aye. The motion carries 4-2. So now we are at the point where we have a second version. Would the board like Mr. Fincham to come back for a second reading of that, or would they like him to go to public hearing?
I make a motion we come back for second reading.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay.
Nay.
Okay. It appears that motion failed, but Mr. Taylor, how did you vote?
Nay.
Mr. Black?
Aye.
Mr. Underwood?
Nay.
Mr. Akers?
Nay.
Mr. Seeley?
Aye.
And I'm going to vote nay, so that motion fails 4-2. Is there another motion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I move that we go straight to public hearing. If I can get a second.